The events of the past week pledged Adu's heart. Too many things were happening within a short time. What worried him most was the secret of that Anani had told him about Amma. Every time he thought about it, he felt like crying. Ever since he had looked at Amma with sorrowful eyes, Anani had told him not to inform her, but there was no way he could keep quiet. Yet he was scared of telling Amma. What would become of her if she got to know this? What would his auntie do? Perhaps she would kill him this time. Since Anani said it was his mother who had gossiped about it in his hearing, how would it affect the relationship between Mansa and his auntie? Now he began to understand why his auntie and Anna's mom were so close. They shared a big secret. Slowly, he got up from behind the back corner of the house. He had been sitting there all evening since supper time, reflecting on these things. On his way into the house, he met Amma. Is that Adu? Amma called. Where have you been? Amma, Adu said. I've been looking for you. Come, there is something I have to tell you. They went back to the place where Adu had been sitting. Amma, Adu began, there is something I should tell you. I didn't want to tell you, but he stopped. Is it something serious? Amma asked. Yes. Amma became more curious. What is it about? She asked. But Adu's courage failed him again. He could not reveal the secret after all. I'm sorry, Amma. Can I tell you tomorrow? I promise. Amma felt disappointed. She rose up and entered the house without saying a word to Adu. As soon as Amma went, Chinguma knew something was wrong. What is it? She asked. Amma kept quiet. I'm talking to you, Amma. Goma insisted. What is the matter? Nothing, mother. I was just thinking about what? Amma was silent. Come here. Amma walked over to Goma. The woman cursed her. It's Adu, Amma finally said. He said he had something to tell me, but he seemed to be afraid to speak. He's making my heart beat. When the last word was out, she regretted it. This could get Adu in trouble. Why did he refuse to tell you? Goma asked Amma. I don't know. At that moment, Adu came in. He was heading for his room when he heard his auntie call. Come here, Adu. Adu went and stood before his aunt. What is it you say? You've got to tell Amma. The question rocked him, and his face showed it. This was the last thing he would have expected Amma and her mother to discuss. He quickly pulled a fast one on his auntie. Auntie, he said, it's about the test they did in class this week. I hear Amma scored the highest marks. Oma looked at her daughter's face to ascertain the truth. A faint smile came to Amma's face. Turning back to Adu, Goma said, then why didn't you tell her? Why did you make it seem as if it was something dreadful? It was dreadful, Adu thought, but he remained silent. Go, Goma said. Adu walked out. If Goma was satisfied with the reply, Amma wasn't at all. It certainly was true that she had scored the highest marks in the geography test, but that was the old news now, and anyway she knew about it. She knew Ado had eaten the truth, and that made matters worse. Later, when Goma was busy with other things, Amma slipped into Ado's room. Ado, what? Why are you doing this to me? All right, Amma, this is fine. I can't tell you tonight, but I promise to tell you tomorrow. Ado kept his promise. Then they were on their way to school in the morning when Adu said, I don't know how you will take this, Amma, but they say, he hesitated, they say my auntie is not your real mother. Emma's eyes flashed. She looked stupefied and stood rooted to the ground. Then, to Adu's surprise, her body relaxed and she laughed. For a moment, no one spoke. Amma searched Adu's eyes and the corners of his mouth to detect confirmation of the joke she had just heard. She found none. Immediately, her smile vanished and her body stiffened again. What did you say, Adu? Anand told me. He said he overheard his mother and other women discussing you and my auntie. He heard that you are not my auntie's real daughter. When later he asked his mother, Emma's body was shaking. The books she held dropped and scattered under her feet. Bits of sweat formed on her brow. Ado had mustered all his courage to reveal this, but now he stood there helpless. Is it true, Ado? The calmness of Emma's voice strangely contradicted her shaking body. I hope it is not true, Amma. Amma looked away from Ado and stared with tear-filled eyes at the ground for a long time. Then slowly, forgetting her books and Ado, she turned back towards home. Where are you going? Ado called after her. She did not reply. Ado bent down to pick the books. When he looked up again, he saw Amma running towards home. He decided to follow her. He didn't regret revealing the secret to her. He didn't fear the consequences from his auntie. He had only one thought: to keep an eye on his friend Amma and to be near her. Amma ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding loudly. On the way, she changed her mind. She wouldn't go home yet. Instead, she dashed into Mansa's house without stopping at the gate and came face to face with the woman. Mansa was alarmed. She dropped the basket she was holding. Amma, Mansa said and placed her hand upon Amma's shoulder. She saw that the girl was crying. What's wrong, Amma? Is your mother at home? Anand's mother, Amma replied. She wiped her eyes in order to see clearly. Is it true? She stopped. Mansa got the hint and began to panic. She was sure someone had broken the secret to Amma. Is it true? Amma went on. That my mother is not my real mother. The woman betrayed herself by placing her palm on her wide open mouth. Who told you? Masa asked, trying to compose herself, but it was too late. So it is true. Amma yelled and began to cry aloud. Because Masa could get hold of Amma, she was already gone. Masa went back to her house, shaking. She knew her son must have leaked the secret. He had been there when she had talked to the other woman about it. Or could it be the woman who had betrayed her in this way? But at the first time, Mansa felt calm about it all. 10 times and more she had suggested to Goma that she should tell Amma she was not her real mother. But Goma had always refused. Perhaps this was the only way Amma could know the truth about herself. When Amma got to the house, Goma was there. Amma stood close to her. She stared at Goma for a long time in a manner that both confused and alarmed the woman. In bewilderment, the two watched each other. Amma's body was still shaking. Her eyes were already red with tears. As Goma looked at her, she saw anger and something else she could not immediately identify. Softly, Goma said, Amma. The girl did not reply. She looked at the woman sitting before her. At first she realized that there was no resemblance between her and the woman she had been calling mother. Physically, in character, and in temperament, they seemed to be miles apart. Amma, Goma called again, as she saw the girl's eyes seizing her up and down. She rose to her feet, but Amma turned away and began to cry. She cried so hard that Goma was confused. She forced the girl into the room and looked on helplessly as Hammer threw herself about, refusing to be comforted. At that point, Ado arrived at the house. Quietly, he entered his room and locked the door. Then he listened. Oh, mother, 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 Amma cried. I'm here. Amma, what's the matter? Oma was dis- disconcerted. My mother. Oh, where are you? Look at me. Amma, are you sick? Can't you see me? What's wrong? My mother. I want my mother. You're sick, Amma. What has gone wrong? Is your head aching? Let me give you some medicine. I want my mother. My mother. Oh, oh, my mother. Where are you? Then the reality hit Goma. Amma had had something. She put back the tablets she was pouring from a small bottle and sat down. Tell me what you're talking about, Amma. Look at me. I want my mother, Amma shouted, and Ado could detect a change in the voice that demanded her mother. He knew anger had replaced the weeping voice. You want who? Amma asked in shaking voice. Almost immediately, Ado could hear yet another voice. Amma spoke with a calm and composure that sharply contrasted with her previous fretting. Is it true that you're not my mother? The question dropped like steel upon the ground. Mama had no answer. Her 14-year-old secret was out and she could keep it no longer. Who told you? Mama asked. Is it true? Amma demanded to know. Goma rose up, trembling. So that was what Adu said. He would tell you. This has nothing to do with Adu, Amma shouted. Go and ask Anne's mother. Then she broke down and wept bitterly. That treacherous woman, Goma yelled. I will teach her to keep her mouth shut. So saying, she stormed out of the room and headed for her friend's house. She soon returned. Masa was not home. Amma was still crying when Goma entered the room and closed the door behind her. Amma, look here. Amma. The girl was so overtaken with grief. She turned to the only mother she had known. Stop crying, Amma. I will explain all this to you. But Amma cried. Why didn't you tell me? You don't understand. Amma, listen to me. But Amma only cried harder. Ado, full of anger and indignation, tiptoed out of his room and left the house.